Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
The head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Mohammed Al-Baradei, accused Iran of not providing complete information regarding its central diffusion facility for its uranium enrichment program. The day after being appointed for a third term as head of the international agency, he requested that Tehran open up 2 of its military sites for inspection. In the face of increased inspections, Iran said that the door is not closed on talks about this issue.
Immediately after being reappointed, Mohammed Baradei, the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, indicated that Iran had failed in its special commitment regarding its uranium enrichment activities. He accused Tehran of not providing enough information or documents to the agency regarding its central diffusion facility, which it uses for uranium enrichment. Thus, Baradei wants Iran to allow his inspectors to visit the 2 military sites of Parshain and Wizantian, knowing that inspectors had previously visited Parshan but were prohibited from returning. The United States suspects that Iran has carried out research on developing nuclear weapons at these 2 sites. However, Iran, which is on the brink of electing a new president, has not given a response yet. Diplomats confirm that the door is not closed to conducting discussions. This position is not new for Tehran, which persistently confirms its peaceful intentions of its nuclear program. However, Al-Baradei's statement opens the way for analysis amidst an environment where he was given a pledge of loyalty for a third time as the head of the international agency. There was much talk about a secret deal between Al-Baradei and Washington, which had rejected reappointing him because it was annoyed by his doubts over U.S. intelligence information regarding weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, and especially because, in America's opinion, his lax position towards Iran. Some political observers believe that his emphasis on Iran fulfilling its commitments was presented to Washington in exchange for getting a more lenient U.S. stance and reversing its opposition to a third term in office. However, others view his statements as an effort to take an unbiased position on the Iranian nuclear file. What is for sure is that Washington exerted efforts to change the director of the International Atomic Energy Agency because it considered him lax. While the United States has been isolated internationally in its position by the rest of the members, it was indicated that Washington would withdraw its rejection of Baradei under the condition that he take a tougher stance on Tehran. It is possible, as indicated by Western diplomats, that Baradei made efforts to gain American acceptance by supporting a detailed American proposal to establish a special committee to prevent violations of the Non-Proliferation Treaty by countries like Iran, Libya, and North Korea. However, others deny any such deal.
Iran has facilitated access to
its nuclear sites and has honored its commitments regarding information on its uranium enrichment activity. However, we need more information on the nature of its central diffusion facility. We are progressing, but we need faster cooperation from Iran.
Only a few days separate Tehran from knowing what will be in the agency's investigative report on the Iranian file. Information leaked by an official at the IAEA headquarters in Vienna indicates that the investigation will support the Iranian confirmation that the weapons-grade uranium residue that was found in its facilities was only a result of pollution. Iran, which supported the reappointment of Baradei, wants to close its nuclear file, a file which is not likely to be closed anytime soon, according to Baradei, who announced that the ball is now in Tehran's court.
من جانب آخر التقى وزير الداخلية The Iraqi Minister of Interior, Mr. Bakr Slak Jaber, met with General Abi Zaid, the head of the U.S. Central Command in the Middle East, and the American delegation that accompanied him. During the meeting, they discussed the security developments and efforts exerted by the Iraqi forces, which have been playing a big role in enforcing order, fighting terrorism and crime. General Abi Zaid praised the lightning operation and its positive role in improving the security situation. Meanwhile, in Mosul in northern Baghdad, multinational forces announced that they have arrested a senior aide of the terrorist Abu Mus'ab al-Zarqawi, the leader of the Al-Qaeda terrorist organization in Iraq. The multinational forces said that some of its forces, in cooperation with Iraqi security forces, have arrested the terrorist Muhammad Khalaf Shakra, the leader of the Al-Qaeda organization in Mosul. In another development, an official from the Iraqi police announced that 8 Iraqi civilians were injured, 3 of them severely, when a booby-trapped car exploded as an Iraqi military convoy was passing by in Kirkuk.
Amidst the security situation, a police source said that 6 Iraqi soldiers were injured after a booby-trapped car exploded when their unit was passing by outside the Iraqi Taliya police station in Baghdad. According to the same source, the wounded were transported to the Kindi hospital. In the Al-Iraqiya neighborhood, one of Baghdad's residential neighborhoods, mortar shells landed on some homes, martyring 5 people and injuring 7 others, according to police officers who witnessed the incident. The wounded were transported to the Yarmouk hospital.
Missiles landed here and I went to see what happened. I realized that all the people in the street were dead. Some people's intestines were outside their body. Others were torn into pieces. I pulled someone by his legs and they came off.
أما في مدينة القدس فقد أعلن قائد الشرطة في مؤتمر صحفي اعتقال 3.
In Al-Quds city, the police chief held a press conference and announced that 13 wanted terrorists have been arrested in a raid operation on 7 terrorist hideouts. He added that the police arrested 704 suspects between the 17th of May and the 15th of June, 6 of which were sentenced to death.
وكان حكم بالإعدام قد صدر على 6 منهم.
احنا هسه حاليا دنطارتهم.
We are pursuing suspects outside the district. These 13 detainees were among them. They confessed to carrying out operations. They are now in Baghdad.
نازلين ببغداد.
هذا وقد قامت قوات الشرطة في محافظة القدس بعمليات دهم.
In the past few days, the police force in Al-Quds district raided locations in El Zafraniya and Diyala Bridge in southern Baghdad. Meanwhile, a spokesman from the multinational forces said that 5 of their soldiers were killed after sustaining wounds from an explosive device that detonated in Al-Ramadi near their units.
The Iraqi forces were also able to arrest a terrorist gang of 4 individuals and found a number of missiles and 1 booby-trapped vehicle that was prepared for an attack in their possession. Iraqi security forces managed to dismantle the vehicle in Radegla in northwestern Baghdad. The terrorists were preparing to attack targets, which often victimize innocent civilians. The arrest of these terrorists confirms that the Iraqi security forces have the ability to pursue the terrorists and destroy their hideouts.
A royal decree has accepted the resignation of Finance Minister Bassem Abdullah from the government of Prime Minister Adnan Badran. The resignation takes immediate effect as of today. Abdullah said in a statement that since he took his duty, he resolutely sought to face up to difficulties and challenges, stimulated by and drawing strength from His Majesty the King's trust. Abdullah said a bright future now looms, whereby a stable Jordan will be able to overcome all hurdles as it scores success after success. His Majesty the King has said reform in Jordan is an irreversible national program that he chose at will for the good of the country. In a message to Prime Minister Adnan Badran, King Abdullah said his decision to adopt and accelerate reform as a course of action stemmed from the vision of the higher national interest. He said that as world powers seek to pressure other countries to take the path of reform, Jordan has been a leading voluntary reformer and will go along that path to achieve prosperity for all Jordanians. He said Badran's endeavor to carry out the King's vision of a future Jordan requires the choice of capable and potent people to translate that vision into a tangible reality. Reform, he explained, means sacrifice at the outset, but is a guarantor of the future of the country's citizens and the prosperity of next generations. The King said it is no wonder that some would resist reform and hold on to the old, as the case with each attempt at positive change. He made it clear that he would tolerate objective criticism, but added that anti-reform voices have sought to deliberately target reformers in person. The King said that although reform is a principle and not persons, the bitter reality is that those voices have succeeded in personifying it. He said Finance Minister Bassem Abdullah, who resigned from the government, was a victim of those. And still in more news, 6 U.S. Marines and more than a dozen Iraqis have been killed in the latest upsurge in violence. In separate incidents, a gunman shot and killed an Iraqi judge and his driver in the northern city of Mosul. And a member of the dissolved Ba'ath Party was killed in Baghdad by 2 armed men disguised as police. More with Samir Jamil.
The bloodshed continues to take lives as insurgents step up their campaign against U.S. forces and Iraqi police. A checkpoint in northern Baghdad was the latest scene of a car bombing, which left 1 Iraqi National Guard dead and 6 others wounded. Later, a second car bomb exploded next to an Iraqi police commando convoy in western Baghdad, killing 6 police and wounding 25 others. The second blast occurred on Baghdad's airport road, one of the most dangerous stretches in the country where roadside and suicide bombs are detonated almost every day. A source in the Iraqi Interior Ministry said most of those wounded were police. This Iraqi soldier says he and his colleagues moved from a street to shift with police. They managed to shift in the first checkpoint, but in the second, a car bomb went off next to them. In Ramadi, west of the capital, U.S. forces suffered one of their highest casualties in a single incident. 5 U.S. Marines were killed while on a combat operation in the insurgent stronghold when their vehicle struck a bomb. A 6th Marine died of wounds suffered during an operation in Ramadi. This is the second time such a high death toll has been inflicted on American forces in the same area in a single blast. It suggests the insurgents have developed more sophisticated bombing techniques. Clashes also flared up in Ramadi, and residents said 5 civilians were killed and 5 others were wounded. They said clashes started shortly before nightfall and continued for several hours. U.S. troops deployed to the center of the city, taking firing position in the streets and raiding a mosque, where morning gathering was being held for 5 people killed by U.S. gunfire near a checkpoint in the town on Tuesday. Further north, a car bomb exploded at an Iraqi army checkpoint in the oil-rich city of Kirkuk, wounding 4 Iraqi soldiers. Kirkuk, where Kurds, Arabs, and Turkmen ethnic groups have staked competing claims to the most important town in the area of big northern Iraqi oil fields, has been the scene of frequent attacks in recent months. Officials in Kirkuk are optimistic, and they stress on a near ending to such violence attacks by working seriously to achieve stability and security to the province. Samir Jamil, Jordan Television.
The Palestinian Hamas group has disclosed that European Union diplomats have held talks with some of its members. Hamas spokesman Mushir al-Masri said its mayors elected in recent local council elections had discussed international assistance and the truce with Israel in talks with EU diplomats. The Israeli newspaper Haaretz reported that the EU had given low-level diplomats permission for contacts with Hamas's political wing. The report signals an apparent shift in EU EU policy and a softening of a diplomatic boycott against Hamas. There was no immediate comment from the EU, which with the United States classifies Hamas as a terrorist group. Israel was quick to voice its concerns, and Foreign Ministry spokesman Mark Regev said the international community should be engaging the moderates in Palestinian society. He criticized a policy that could be perceived as appeasing what he called extremists. The countdown for a pullout from the Gaza Strip has begun as Israel stepped up preparations. Israel placed caravans on a site intended to serve as temporary homes for settlers earmarked for evacuation. A convoy of trucks arrived at the dune site of Nazanim, located near the Gaza Strip, delivering prefabricated homes as workers set up electricity poles. The project manager said accommodation units would be ready according to plan by August 5th or 6th. He said the residents are supposed to be Gush Katif evacuees. Israeli officials say the site is being prepared to absorb 450 caravan units. Nazanim residents and environmental activists opposed the temporary settlement, concerned that it would become a permanent community and harm the ecology of the largely undeveloped dunes area. Israel's planned evacuation of 6,500 Gaza settlers will be a huge relief for Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. And still in more news, European Union leaders meeting in Brussels for a two-day summit have called for a 9 to 12-month freeze on the European Union constitution. But conservative leaders are not in agreement. The 25 EU leaders are trying to reach resolutions on two major issues, which could plunge the European Union into a crisis: a constitution that was torpedoed by French and Dutch voters, and a budget dispute. Key issues on the budget dispute include Britain's annual rebate, EU farm spending, the size of the overall budget, the contributions of big net payers such as Germany, the Netherlands, and Sweden, and aid to old EU members Italy and Spain. Britain branded the latest compromise proposals on the European Union budget unacceptable and threatened to wield its veto. London has been under severe pressure from EU countries, led by Germany and France, to give up the multi-billion euro budget rebate won in the 80s by former Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, when the country was poorer. Blair has said any compromise must include French concessions on agricultural subsidies, an issue ruled out by both France and Germany. The French-British tussle over the rebate is one of the main sticking points in EU budget negotiations. And campaigning in Iran's tight presidential race has ended with moderate cleric Akbar Hashemi Rafsanjani leading a pack of 7. However, opinion polls indicate that he will not win the 50% support that he needs to avert an unprecedented runoff vote. 3 conservative hopefuls and 3 reformists are now competing against Rafsanjani, all wishing to succeed President Mohammad Khatami, who's not allowed to stand for a 3rd consecutive term. Hardline candidate Mohsen Rizai pulled out yesterday after trailing near the bottom of his polls. His move is likely to strengthen the remaining 3 hardline candidates, but they still lag behind Rafsanjani, who wants closer ties with the West. Rival young campaigners came together and clogged the capital streets into the early morning in a final bid to win over undecided voters before tomorrow's elections. The vote could determine the fate of Iran's nuclear standoff with the West and ties with the arch foe, the United States. But whoever wins real power in the country will still rest with the conservative anti-West religious authorities. And Lebanon's Prime Minister Najib Mikati says economic reform is necessary for the country's development. The 11th Arab Economic Forum started in Lebanon, bringing together 900 high-level participants from 25 countries. Discussions are expected to focus on the challenges facing the Arab world and efforts to achieve sustainable growth and the creation of new employment opportunities. Lebanon is burdened with the heftiest debt, reaching $36 billion, of which the central bank holds $11 billion. A 6% growth rate had been predicted this year for the country before the February 14th assassination of former Prime Minister Rafiq al-Hariri, which threw the country into its worst political crisis since its 15-year civil war. Turkish Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who was the guest of honor at the forum, expressed sorrow over the loss of Hariri, who had been the honorary chairman of the forum since 1996.
Sixteen-year-old Palestinian youths were engaged in becoming suicide bombers. The orders and the money came from Hezbollah. Today, it was permitted to reveal that the leaders of this group were arrested. Here is a report from our correspondent, Ronnie Daniel.
This is not the first time it has happened. These are pictures showing the youth during earlier arrests at the Hawara roadblock near Nablus. This new organized group that the Secret Service recently arrested is lowering the standards of their strategy. From a distance and from Lebanon, Hezbollah, with a lot of money and training, are instructing adult Fatah leaders on how to recruit 15 and 16-year-olds. They are instructed by Fatah and Tanzim on how to enter Israel because it is easier for teenagers to do so. Although it is a quiet period, the time is being used to reconstruct the infrastructure and to prepare materials so they can return to places like the Stage nightclub and similar public places for suicide bombings. One of the teenagers, which was worried that his parents' home would be destroyed, gave himself up and uncovered the size of this new initiative. This time, the 4 recruiters were arrested, as well as the 4 teens they recruited. One of them already filmed his suicide diary, so he was very close to carrying out the act. They were arrested inside Nablus and the surrounding refugee camps.
There is a lot of criticism in Israel over school books in Arab countries and incitement towards Israel. But what do people in Arab countries think about Israeli school books?
How do our school books and education system look in the eyes of Arabs? The Hezbollah organization views our children as hating the Arabs. But according to research done by Arab academics, the following picture emerges.
The Jews teach their children at a young age, and their books say, look at them living in other lands. Expansion. Always look at other lands. They teach them to steal.
Some researchers also quote what is happening in classrooms in Israel, not only in the books.
In the Zionist entity, when the teacher enters the classroom to give the lesson, the students stand, and instead of welcoming the teacher, they say, "Tu, tu, tu, may the Arabs die."
Not only educators, but also religious leaders are getting involved. They are looking at the older children's books that were circulated in Israel.
For example, in the story of Danny Dean, this story is in a series of children's books that depict this child as a historic superpower character capable of defeating all the Arabs. Then they say, "You teach your children terrorism?" So I respond, "What are you teaching your children?"
We have to say that these researchers are not up to date. They do not represent all Arab academia.
Even if we say that what you wrote is correct, it is half the truth. It is true that there is also a culture of hatred by the Arabs.
Are you talking about the Arabs?
Yes, I am talking about the Arabs and the image of Jews in the media and in the Egyptian films starting from 1940.
So this is how the school books of Israel are represented, but amidst a mood of reform in the Middle East today, perhaps all of this will change.
The Israeli occupation government protested the European Union's announcement that permits European diplomats to carry out meetings and discussions with the Hamas movement. Hamas considered these meetings a window that may allow the West to see the truth about what is happening in the Palestinian territories. The European Union's announcement permitting European diplomats to carry out meetings and discussions with the Islamic Hamas movement is nothing new to the group. However, it announced it supported meetings with the Europeans, which may clarify the truth about what is taking place in the occupied Palestinian territories.
We at the Hamas movement, we do not want the doors of the West, especially of Europe, to be open only to our Zionist enemy. The Palestinians have the right to offer their opinions to the Europeans and to the Western parties, so that the truth about the developments taking place in Palestinian territories is uncovered.
The Israeli occupation government protested the European Union's announcement, considering it an obstacle to the peace process.
Anyone who is interested in seeing the peace process move forward and seeing reconciliation between the Israelis and Palestinians and the creation of democratic Palestinian institutions cannot see Hamas as a partner in this.
However, the EU, which did not deny permitting such meetings, attempted to justify its position, saying that the discussions will be focused on development projects and the election process. It remains firm in considering the group a terrorist organization.
Our policy is clear.
Our policy is clear. We will have no dealings with the leadership of Hamas until they renounce violence and renounce the destruction of the State of Israel.
Hamas confirmed that its meetings with the Europeans will not influence its firm stance on choosing resistance as long as the Israeli occupation continues its policies of assassination. The village of Mordor in the northern West Bank, where the occupation forces uprooted acres of olive trees to expand the separation wall on Palestinian land, resulting in these clashes. The armed group, which calls itself the Arab Struggle Movement for the Liberation of the Hawaz, published a video on an Iranian separatist website and claimed responsibility for a series of recent aggressive attacks in Iran. Statements by a member of the Iranian Supreme National Security Council, Ali Agha Mohammadi, accused terrorist organizations who are supported by American occupation forces in Iraq of being behind the attacks. This explosion killed 8 people and wounded more than 70 others.
Within a few hours, Iranians inside the country and across the world will turn out at the polls in a display of national solidarity. The tied presidential race saw the campaign reach its climax Wednesday night when supporters of the 7 candidates kept a night vigil, sparing no effort to attract more votes. The official time frame for the presidential campaign ended at 900 hours Thursday, 24 hours before the voting, which officially starts in 41,000 polling stations nationwide and 114 constituencies across the world on Friday. All Iranians born before June 17, 1990 are eligible to vote, and overseas-based Iranians will have to produce their birth certificates or passports. Interior Minister Abdullah Musavilari says the election results are most likely to be released by late Saturday, and that his ministry is prepared for a possible runoff on June 24th. Meanwhile, the Guardians Council announced that some 300,000 inspectors will supervise the voting process. Foreign Minister Kamal Karazi says a vast turnout by the Iranians in June 17th presidential election will change the views of many all through the world about Iran. Karazi said that Thursday and at Iranians' huge turnout will prove to the world Iran enjoys a live society and that Iranians are ready to defend their cause.
The views expressed on Mosaic are not those of Link TV or its sponsors, but of the broadcasters themselves. Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities. And the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation and Henry and Virgilia Dakin.